From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And coming up today, K-State's Dan O'Brien tells why there may be some optimism for better corn prices heading into 2018. And he'll talk about how grain sorghum may be selling at a premium to corn into the new year during Dan's weekly segment on the grain market trends. Following then, K-State's Jane Lingenfelser talking about the standout performers in K-State's 2017 Grain Sorghum Performance Test, the results of which have now been compiled and are available to you growers online right now. The printed version of the test report distributed starting next week. And later on Kansas agricultural weather, complete with the holiday travel outlook, K-State's Mary Knapp. All this and more straight ahead on Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
This is the K-State Radio Network. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Offering up on this first segment our final grain market overview and analysis of this calendar year, 2017, with our guest, Dan O'Brien, grain market economist for K-State Research and Extension. He is stationed in northwest Kansas out of Colby. Dan, you've pulled together some end-of-year notes on the markets that folks can see now on the agmanager.info website. You're taking it grain by grain with your in-depth outlook, and the one that you've completed to date is on corn. So there is at least one factor there that might suggest that corn prices could ebb upward eventually in 2018, right?
Yes, we have so much that we're pessimistic about across all the grain markets that when you do see underlying factors that at least bring pause to wonder whether the market's paying attention to them, it's good to point them out. In the corn market, as you look at the world supply and demand balances for corn, the large majority of the growth we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years has all come from the United States. In fact, we're seeing the ending stocks of corn outside the U.S., i.e. foreign stocks, actually declining. They were about 23% stocks to use 171 million metric tons 2015-16. Declined a little bit in 2016-17 from 23% stocks to use down to just about 20. And here this year, projected to drop down to 142 million metric tons, about 16.5% stocks to use. So we have seen growth in world stocks overall in aggregate, but almost all that growth has been due to what we've done here in the U.S. with our large crops. So what difference does that make in terms of world markets? Well, what it would show then is I think that if we move out into the spring and summer months of 2018 and do have any U.S. crop problems, that there aren't just abundant stocks elsewhere in the world to pick up the slack. So on the one hand, we have large stocks in the U.S. Our domestic prices are certainly under pressure when we look at 2.3 billion bushels of carry-out and 16, 17% stocks to use. But, again, when you look around the world, apparently there aren't excess piles of corn in other countries like there are in our country. So we are right now kind of serving as the world's excess storage stockpile for corn. But if we'd have any crop problems in 2018, there aren't that many other places to turn. So that's something to bear in mind that could bring about more price volatility in the corn market should we get a weather scare or set of weather worries off into May, June, July, and August than we'd otherwise see. Otherwise, these large carryovers are mitigating almost any enthusiasm that we see in the corn market. And we saw it this summer. You know, when we were worried about what might happen in corn, we went basically to $4, a little bit over in some pastures, and we've been tighter for For carry in stocks, we'd go to 5. Heavens, we'd go near 6, in terms of what the futures might do. But these large carryovers are really a burden, and kind of an overhang on the market, and they sort of mitigate what might happen in terms of any price rallies. We do see strong usage in everything else but exports. And we see moderate usage in exports, slow so far, but we've had record high ethanol production, strong livestock usage, as strong as we've seen in a decade or so, livestock feed usage, wet corn milling, moving to near record levels. So all our domestic use categories are doing as well or better than they've ever done, or near as well as they've ever done. But the export side is kind of the mitigating, moderating demand category that's holding us back just a little bit. You do see forecasts for Brazilian corn to be down about 3 million metric tons to 95 million. So far, in the world numbers, Argentina's corn production is projected to be level to a little bit higher, but you really wonder if that's taking into account any of the dry conditions that they're having right now in Argentina and in the southern part of Brazil. So those numbers are subject to change. And again, their harvest in Brazil runs from basically February through May. In Argentina, March through May. So we won't know what their outcomes are from actual harvest figures until we get into late February and March in those two countries, or at least then we'll begin to see it. Right now, of course, we're in steadfast manner storing corn or selling it to move, etc., to see what we might have as we move through now the end of this year on into January, February, and by that time we'll have another quarterly stocks report or more. We'll see if exports pick up or not, and February 15th, March 1st, we'll come back, look at these markets, and see if the supply-demand situation has changed much away from this what we have right now, the large stocks, pretty pessimistic view of the future market scenarios that are portrayed in the grain futures at this time.
Now, Dan, as exports go, grain sorghum represents the other side of the coin. Unlike corn, we see sales of grain sorghum abroad flourishing at the moment.
The USDA in November had a projection of 210 million bushels of exports of U.S. grain sorghum for this marketing year. Again, the one started September 1st, and they jumped that up to 260 million bushels. Basically, are raising the question of, well, is 260 enough or is it too much? When you take the USDA's numbers that they have right now, they're projecting about a 5 to 6% stocks-to-use, and grain sorghum prices about $3.10. When you look at Central Kansas bids, they're for grain sorghum, as we looked at them the other day for a meeting we had in Salina for our one of our Farming for the Future conferences. On that day, grain sorghum prices in the Salina area were offering bids that were at or above corn, just the way it was, and that's driven by this export demand. So really our question is now, where are we going with grain sorghum on export quantity? And if instead of 260 million bushels, we drop back to 230, which would still be tremendous relative to what we thought we'd have, then we're more along the lines of, say, we end up with about 41 million bushels carry out, about 11-12% stocks to use. Again, maintain this $3.10 price. If we don't stop at 260 and go to 290, then we get awfully tight. We're getting closer to 4.5% stocks to use. The situation becoming very difficult to find much grain sorghum in the country. Prices probably jump up to $3.35, $3.40 or more. If you really saw grain sorghum have an exuberant export demand pull going on, do they start to move in such a strong manner to the upside that they start to dissociate a little bit with corn prices? I mean, that would be kind of the extreme outcome. I don't know that you would see that. Eventually, buyers, because of the close substitutability of corn and grain sorghum, you would wonder that if they would start to look at pricing opportunities for corn and start to move that way instead if grain sorghum prices get too high, given the substitutability of those two. So that's something to watch, but surely is the issue right now with grain sorghum, i.e. that of strong prices and improved profitability prospects for that particular crop.
Now, in the wheat complex, the wild card at the moment anyway, winter wheat acreage is still to be fully quantified by the USDA, and there are some private estimates out there for sure, but there's no consensus yet on that, and that will be a factor here at some point, will it not, market-wise?
Yeah, we'll have a winter wheat seedings report, I believe, to come out on January the 12th, along with this other set of major reports that we'll be seeing, the annual crop production summary, quarterly stocks report, and other USDA information, of course, the WASDE report. You do see some respected private analysts coming in and all giving, I guess I'd call them succinct and objective views that, gosh, it looks like we're going to be down 5-6%, something like that. So if you look at the surprises that could happen on either side of that, and that would be for all U.S. wheat, hard red winter carrying the burden of that reduction. You know, the surprise, again, as you and I have been saying, Eric, would be as if we had less than that, given what we've been hearing from people in the countryside, here in Kansas as we do meetings and elsewhere around the Great Plains. Who would be surprised if we came in with a stronger number than that, i.e., closer to 10% reduction or whatever? It just really remains to be seen. And, to the degree that we see even more reduction in hard red winter wheat acreage than these, 3, 4, 5% reductions. I think USDA came out with 2 the other day. To the degree you see more of that, then maybe the good news of that is that you're really taking a stronger step towards the rebalancing of supply and demand that we need to see in the wheat market, which has really been plagued of late by our own success in production and slow exports, and has got such large carryover percentages, 45, 50%. So challenging times in the wheat market, and I guess we'll just have to see where all that goes. And so I think as we end this year, we have anything but exciting grain markets, but there are issues that will have to be dealt with. Production uncertainty, supply uncertainty, that all have the potential to change these markets, but the key point is that they haven't yet. So we'll just have to wait and see about 3, 4, 5 months into the year to see if we get those game-changing adjustments in the supply-demand balance sheets for these major crops that we grow in Kansas.
We will pick back up on the markets and the respective trends in the new year, Dan. So enjoy your holiday break. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you and yours, and looking forward to working with you again in 2018. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
That is Dan O'Brien, grain market economist with K-State Research and Extension. We'll return with more here on the K-State Radio Network.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
We're back now on This Agriculture Today, as is our next guest, to share the just completed results of the 2017 K-State Grain Sorghum Performance Tests. We had her on recently to talk about the corn hybrid performance trials out of K-State this year. Jane Lingenfelser with us once more. Jane, as you know, is a K-State agronomist, and she oversees the crop performance tests every year. So now the suite of numbers is complete with these grain sorghum figures in, Jane, and they are available to growers for their reference as we speak, correct?
That's right. They are available on our website. That address is www.agronomy, that's agronomy.ksu.edu, and the annual publication will be coming out as an insert in High Plains Journal magazine, as it always does. It will be printed this coming Monday, and it will be in local extension offices soon after that. Or it can be ordered by calling the K-State KSRE bookstore. That number is 785-532-1150. And an electronic copy will also be available at the KSRE Digital Library, and that address is www.ksre.ksu.edu/bookstore/crops.
As the growing season went for our grain sorghum in Kansas, it was a better than average year for sure, wasn't it?
It was generally another productive year for grain sorghum. For most of the state, there was plenty of moisture throughout the growing season, and the temperatures, particularly the nighttime temperatures, when sorghum is doing most of its metabolic and reproductive activity, were fairly mild this year. However, bushels per acre weren't quite where they have been for the past couple of years, and we continue to see stand issues in the early season and sorghum heads that aren't completely filled. The state average forecasted by the USDA was 82 bushels per acre this year. That's down 9 bushels from last year. And this year, we didn't see the prevalence of sugarcane aphids and other pests and diseases that we can really pinpoint as the cause of the dip in the yields. However, what was lost in yields was somewhat made up for in grain quality, as more than 50% of the crop was rated as good or excellent in a harvest. So overall, 2017 was a decent year in sorghum, but not without its challenges.
And that initial challenge was from the get-go a rather auspicious start to the crop because of wet conditions at planting time.
Yes, and much like the trend that we've seen for the last few years, the spring was very wet and delayed planting in many areas. And in the case of the performance tests, especially those in the central quarter of the state, there were heavy rains within 48 hours of planting that later caused issues with plant populations. However, mid-season warm temperatures did speed up the vegetative growth of the crop, which compensated for the planting delays caused by the wet conditions. Most production regions of the state had normal precipitation amounts in 2017. Mary Knapp did provide cumulative precipitation graphs for each testing locations, so you can easily see the rainfall distribution for each of the trials.
But once more, temperatures were hardly interfering at all with grain sorghum this year.
They really weren't. Now, there was a brief spell of above-average temperatures during grain filling, which hastened the maturity of the crop, and we thought it might be an earlier harvest. But the increased precipitation over most of the state delayed the dry down and pushed back harvest into late October or late November in many cases. The autumn freeze did come later than normal this year, but depending on the timing of the crop development, the freeze mainly impacted the final seed weight and the quality of the sorghum crop, and not so much the yield.
All right. What we'd like to do, Jane, is what we've done in the past, and that is canvass the results by region around the state and just what hybrids tended to consistently stand out in those areas. And you will mention those, but noting that that is by no means the end-all and be-all list, right?
That's right. It's not an exhaustive list because I'll only mention those that did well across multiple locations within a region. Okay. There were undoubtedly hybrids that were higher yielding in the individual locations, but I won't be mentioning them this time. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Pioneer for providing our maturity check hybrids again this year.
With that, off we go. Northeast Kansas, you had 3 dryland test locations to pull from.
Yes, we had locations in Manhattan, Belleville, and Beloit. The average across the northeast dryland region was 117 bushels. And the hybrids that did well, again, this is not the exhaustive list, but those that did well across all the locations, DeKalb DKS 53 did well, Galen Ward Seed EXP 9127, and Golden Acres 5556 did well in the northeast dryland region.
And if you look at the standouts in the southeast dryland tests, 2 locations here, you actually have one of those hybrids which performed well in that region as well.
That's right. Our southeast dryland locations were Ottawa and Parsons. The average in the southeast was 156 bushels, which was a phenomenal year for sorghum in that area. And the hybrids that did well, DeKalb DKS 5353, again, did really well. Also, Chromatin CHR 0029, Dynagro GX 16367, and Golden Acres 3960 did well in the southeast dryland region.
You also featured in the overall tests a dryland site in central Kansas. Originally, you had 2 plantings there, but you say one of the test sites had to be abandoned.
We had Asaria in Saline County. Our test at Hutchinson in Reno County had to be abandoned due to bird feeding. In the space of about 48 hours, they completely devastated the plot. So we were left with Asaria, which unfortunately was also a kind of marginal test. The average at Asaria was 43 bushels, but the hybrids that did well, Dynagro GX 16855 did well, also Golden Acres 5556, and Phillips PSF 756 did well in the central region.
So enough there to make comparisons between hybrids, as is always the case, location to location. Out in the western part of the state, you had 4 sites that featured dryland grain sorghum tests.
Yes, we had Hayes, Colby, Tribune, and Garden City. The average across the West Dryland region was 99 bushels. Typically, early maturing hybrids have the advantage in the Western test. They just, develop when the conditions are better. But in the past couple of years, we've seen that medium and late maturing hybrids have done better in the West. And those hybrids were, this year, DeKalb DKS 3816 did well. Dynagrow M60 GB31 did well, and Phillips PSF 746 did well in the West Dryland region.
And lastly, you did conduct irrigated grain sorghum tests likewise, and once more at 4 locations.
Yes, we had Colby, Garden City, Tribune, and Hutchinson. The average across the irrigated regions was 136 bushels. And hybrids that did well under irrigation, BH Genetics BH 5677, DeKalb DKS 3816, Dynagrow GX 15371, and Phillips PSF 746 did well in the irrigated region.
Once more, that is not the complete data by any stretch of the imagination on these hybrids. You are encouraging producers to take the information they draw from the overall tests for the location that reflects their growing conditions the best, and then make their hybrid selection decisions based on that information along with much more.
That's right. And again, the results are available online at agronomy.ksu.edu. They're also available at the KSRE Digital Library. That address is ksre.ksu.edu/bookstore/crops. And the printed copies will be available in the next few weeks as an insert in the High Plains Journal magazine, and will be in local extension offices after that.
Very good. And to note, Jane, before we let you go, that this information would be good study-up material, if you will, for that series of 3 grain sorghum production schools that K-State Research and Extension will be putting on in February. And you would invite producers to have a look at the test results, bring their questions to those schools about hybrid performance.
That's right. And if they want to get their own copy of the Kansas Performance Test with grain sorghums, they can go to any of these 3 schools. The dates and locations are February 6th, Dodge City will be at the Boot Hill Casino Conference Center. On February 7th, it will be in Hutchinson at the Hutchinson Community College. February 8th, it will be in Washington at the First National Bank in Washington. And lunch will be provided courtesy of the sponsors. There is no cost to attend, but participants are asked to pre-register before January 31st. And registration can be done online at K-State Sorghum Schools, or you can also register by emailing or calling the nearest local research and extension office for the location you plan to attend.
Once more, February 6th, Dodge City. February 7th, Hutchinson, February the 8th in Washington. Do be in attendance, if at all possible, for these K-State Grain Sorghum Production Schools, noting here those are co-sponsored by the Kansas Grain Sorghum Commission. Good information from the performance trials once again this year, Jane. Lots of work goes into putting all of this together, conducting, and then pulling the data for the trials. So thanks for doing all of that, and happy holidays.
Well, thanks for having me.
Jane Lingenfelser, K-State agronomist in charge of the crop performance tests for Kansas State University every year. It's just out now, the summary of the grain sorghum performance trials in 2017 for you producers to review and utilize as you go about making your hybrid selection decisions for 2018 grain sorghum cropping. You're tuned to Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State Research and Extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
Broadcasting from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. In today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN, Congress has closed out 2017 with another funding measure to keep the government operating temporarily. However, that disaster package failed to get a vote in the Senate. The House and Senate yesterday passing the continuing resolution funding the government through January the 19th. The Senate did not take up the $81 billion disaster bill that would have provided assistance to folks affected by hurricanes and wildfires and aid to cotton and dairy producers. The Senate vote to keep the government funding 66-32. Earlier, the House had passed the bill by a vote of 231 to 188. The votes do clear the way for the president to sign the bill before the current continuing resolution expires at midnight tonight. Now, that resolution includes a provision exempting the tax bill passed earlier this week for the statutory pay-as-you-go rules that would have required cuts to farm program spending in 2018. That means the president can also sign the tax bill as early as today rather than wait until January. The disaster bill, however, has funding language in it for cotton and dairy producers that once passed would also build a baseline for those provisions in the upcoming farm bill debate. The House voted again 251 to 169 to pass the disaster bill that also declared seed cotton to be eligible for farm subsidies, repealed a limitation on crop insurance for livestock, and set up a national accuracy clearinghouse that was expected to lead to a cut in spending on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. However, the Senate decided to wait until January to deal with that disaster aid. The bill did come under scathing criticism from conservative groups such as Heritage Action, which said the bill had too many spending provisions, including what they called an unacceptable expansion of already excessive handouts to the cotton industry. The group urged that Congress vote against the bill. The bill would require 60 votes to pass the Senate. However, House Agriculture Committee Chairman Mike Conaway of Texas praised the House passage of the disaster bill and urged senators to support it. National Milk Producers Federation President Jim Mulhern applauded the House as well for including the dairy provision, which he credited to Conaway and House Agriculture Ranking Member Colin Peterson. Mulhern said the provision would eliminate the existing $20 million annual cap on the livestock gross margin program, enabling the USDA to offer coverage to more producers in the current program and provide new risk management options for dairy producers. However, Senate Agriculture Committee Ranking Member Debbie Stabenow has said that the dairy provision is too small, and Mulhern said the dairy producers support the efforts of Stabenow and Leahy to include MPP improvements in the final supplemental spending bill. And the details of a settlement in the Viptera corn lawsuit likely will not be completed by year's end, as both sides in that 3-year-long legal case continue to finalize the agreement. This according to court documents filed in U.S. District Court for the District of Kansas in Kansas City. On Wednesday, the court extended an existing stay on a number of lawsuits filed against Syngenta in a number of states, including Kansas, to allow the settlement work to be completed. Back in September, Syngenta announced a settlement with producers who sued the company following the release of Agrisure Viptera and Agrisure Duracade MIR 162 corn traits. Details of the settlement not released. The settlement reportedly was worth about $1.5 billion. The settlement is subject to court approval and would create a settlement fund for the submission of claims by eligible claimants who contracted to price corn or corn byproducts after September the 15th of 2013. This week, the court announced a scheduled settlement hearing for January the 25th. This is Agriculture Today. A new team of spokespersons for the Kansas wheat industry recently went through an extensive training session learning about the nutritional aspects of wheat-based foods and about aspects of wheat production as well. Marsha Boswell provides a recap on this week's Kansas Wheat Scoop. Marsha?
Wheat farmers across Kansas have an incredible story to tell. Stories about family farming operations, explanations of the science behind wheat, and recipes using the wheat they produce are all part of a narrative that captivates audiences. Sharing these stories, promoting the joy of baking, and making connections from Kansas wheat farmers to audiences around the state is the purpose of the Speak for Wheat spokesperson program sponsored by Kansas Wheat. Current spokespersons gathered in Manhattan at the Kansas Wheat Innovation Center on December 15th to receive the latest training in wheat production, research, wheat foods, and nutrition. Cindy Falk, nutrition educator, and Jeline DeRushi, nutrition educator assistant, gave a new demonstration on easy and economical homemade noodles, a well-developed recipe that can create over a pound of noodles for 55 cents. Spokespersons will be able to give this demonstration during various programs around the state. Justin Gilpin, CEO of Kansas Wheat, provided an update on the state of wheat production and research, and the Kansas Wheat Communications team announced eatwheat.org, a digital campaign focused on sharing the Farm to Fork story. Other speakers for the day included Karen Blakesley of K-State Research and Extension, who gave a brief overview of food trends, and Sharon Davis of Home Baking Association, who provided an update on baking food safety. Cindy Falk, Kansas Wheat nutrition educator, says each of our spokespersons has a personal connection to wheat through farming, teaching, or a background in nutrition, and all are passionate about sharing those experiences with others. The Speak for Wheat program was founded in 1986 by Sharon Davis, then the nutritionist for the Kansas Wheat Commission. The program started off small with 12 volunteers, but has since grown to 33 spokespersons across the state. This hardworking team consists of wheat producers, registered dietitians, family and consumer science teachers, and retired extension agents. Spokespersons are broken up into 3 teams: nutrition, field to table, and production and research. They frequently address family and consumer science classrooms, 4-H and FFA groups, state extension personnel, health and food fairs, and more. They present at classrooms, Ag Day events, and the Agriland Educational Area at the Kansas State Fair. Help your friends, family, and neighbors here and around the world rediscover their love of wheat. Interested persons should be able to assist with 6 programs or exhibits per year and attend training sessions. To learn more about the program, please visit kansaswheat.org. For Kansas Wheat, I'm Marsha Boswell.
Thanks, Marsha, and happy holidays. We'll be back with K-State's Mary Knapp after this. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today, 800-321-3276, or visit us online, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions. Closing out this Agriculture Today, the update on Kansas agricultural weather for you, courtesy of our guest, Mary Knapp, Research and Extension climatologist at K-State. She steps over from the Weather Data Library here at the university. Winter is officially here as of yesterday, Mary, and the conditions out there reflect that.
Right. We had a very rude introduction to winter, particularly in the northwest and north central areas of the state. They probably had the worst combination of winter moisture in that it was very light, but it was at below freezing temperatures. So that meant a glaze that would accumulate on the roadways. And the glaze was light enough that people weren't necessarily as cautious in their driving patterns as they would have been with a heavier event. The other downside of that is that it was so light that it's not going to have any kind of impact on our continuing drought situation. So again, worst combination, light precipitation, freezing temperatures, fog, again, a very nasty mix. And of course, that was the front of a very, very cold air mass, and that has been moving through the state now. I think it has finally gotten all the way through, and that, of course, is bringing our very cold temperatures. And this is just the beginning of this cold air. We are expected maybe to make it above freezing today, but not very likely to be much above it, certainly not out of the 30s, and that's going to continue through the weekend and into Christmas Day. We might see a little bit of a warm-up on that, but again, much more seasonal temperatures close to what we would typically see at this time of the year. The lows are going to be a little bit on the cold side. We're going to see temperatures down in the teens and maybe some single digits, which of course will have wheat producers concerned because the dry soils and the rapid shift in temperatures is going to make it difficult for that winter wheat to adjust to these colder temperatures.
And as we visited with K-State's Joel DeRusi earlier this week, livestock protection is of the utmost here as well.
Right. You want to make sure that they have access to shelter so that they can get out of these winds. With that, as people are out working with their livestock and doing their regular activities, we do have our feature. The wind chill map is available. We've got the link on our main page, so you can go to mesonet.ksu.edu and click right there on that. If you're looking for how far those temperatures have dropped and how long they stayed there, there's also a link to our freeze monitor where you can look at those numbers as well and answer your curiosity of just how cold was that.
It's really handy information on wind chill, on the duration of freezing temperatures at mesonet.ksu.edu. And for the record, the drought monitor this week would likely suggest that our drought conditions have deepened in Kansas.
They have, in that we have expanded the abnormally dry conditions to include that last little corner in the northeast. We haven't really switched or expanded the area of moderate or severe drought yet. At this time of the year, things tend to move rather slowly because we don't have as much demand as we do during the summer season when you've got much more active vegetative growth. But again, it hasn't improved any, and despite the outlook where the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlook are both calling for wetter than normal conditions, the confidence in that is not particularly high. And even if we do have wetter than normal conditions, it's not likely to improve conditions very rapidly. At this time of the year in eastern Kansas, we're averaging about, our normal would be about 0.03 of an inch a day. If you've got a 3-inch deficit, it's going to take some time to make any inroads on that. In western Kansas, the average daily precipitation is even lower. So again, it's going to not make any major improvements, at least in the near term.
So what does that portend for travel conditions into this weekend and surrounding the Christmas holiday? There may be some winter moisture out there, but not much to impede travel?
It's not likely to cause much difficulty in Kansas or to our south. The areas that are going to see the most travel difficulty will be in the northern Rockies. They've had snow in western Colorado, most of Montana. They are calling for some travel issues that may develop in the Great Lakes or New England into the east. So a lot will depend upon how you're traveling. If you're looking at flying, difficulties in any of the major hubs can cascade rather rapidly, so you could be stuck in a sunny airport waiting for a plane that's caught in adverse weather somewhere else. Mm-hmm. If you're driving, again, in the immediate vicinity, not likely to be an issue. If you're heading for a ski vacation in the Rockies, you might run into some difficulties in the northern states. Again, northern Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, not so much difficulty if you're going south into Arizona or New Mexico, where, again, they're suffering from the drought situation, as are we.
And as for Kansas, a white Christmas, well, if so, it'll be spotty.
Very, very, very unlikely that anybody's going to see a white Christmas. This was our best chance of moisture that we saw, or with the most significant amounts with yesterday's storm. There is about a 30% chance of moisture Saturday into Sunday, but again, we're talking less than 1/100 of an inch of liquid out of that, which means you may see a few flakes, but not likely. Most of the forecasts that I've seen so far call for sunny on Christmas Day, so the bigger question will be what happens for our New Year, because we do have a history of having our big winter events on New Year's Eve and not Christmas Eve. And there is some rumbles of another system coming through 28th or 29th of December, and we'll watch for that.
All right. Well, folks, take care in any regard as far as your traveling conditions around Kansas and beyond, and keep an eye to your weather outlooks from your outlets of choice. Mary, we appreciate the update, and Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to you. We'll catch up with you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Eric. Same to you and all your listeners.
Mary Knapp on Kansas agricultural weather, research and extension climatologist here at K-State. And Kansas State University will be closed over this next week for the holidays, so we'll be away as well, returning at the same time on Tuesday, January the 2nd. Looking forward to visiting with you again then. In the meantime, a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you and yours. Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.